What's up, everyone? Welcome back. There's another one for you today, a very interesting one on psychology. Today we have a very special guest. I know him from Twitter. I don't know if you have any other outlets like YouTube, but his name is Thaddeus Patrick. Um, Welcome. And of course, we have Mary, Milos, and Carl and Strahinja will join in later. First off, Thaddeus, do you want to introduce yourself real quick before we start?
Yeah, I'm Thaddeus. I probably most prominent on Twitter, and I have a little bit of activity on Instagram and Facebook. And I have a YouTube channel with just a handful of videos on different Orthodox and psychology topics. I'm a Orthodox therapist. I'm not a licensed counselor. I just have a blessing from my priest to kind of do a blend of psychology and the church fathers together to kind of like give people practical advice for their everyday living. So yeah, that's what I do and what I love. So
Sounds good. And what's your YouTube name called?
it's my main channel is Thaddeus Creative.
All right, Thaddeus Creative. All right, we'll
Yeah, and that's my
pop that
website
in.
too. Thaddeusthought.com if
All
anybody
right,
wants to find kind of my
we'll pop your links in the
resources.
description and
Awesome.
in the video. Um, I know Milos has studied psychology too. Did you finish it?
Not yet.
Not yet, not yet. So he's in the
No.
process. Mary, do you have any experience with psychology at all?
Well, I did go to a Orthodox therapist myself when I was younger and dealing with mental issues when
Yeah.
I was, yeah, as a kid, because I struggled with uh, quite a few things. But yeah, no, Orthodox therapists were like the one I had, which she was
You're lagging.
wonderful,
All
very
right, not
like
anymore.
very good. Like I was able to. Oh, sorry. Oh,
I
okay.
think you're lagging a bit, but it's fine.
Um, I I was able to okay, sorry. I was able to connect with her a lot more and like I feel like because we were Orthodox, we're both Orthodox, and that made me feel a lot more comfortable opening up, you
Hmm.
know, as well. So yeah.
Well, I've been to quite a few ones as well. I have ADHD, autism, all kind of stuff, and I had some problems when I was younger. So I've been through a lot of psychologists and stuff. But it was before I was really orthodox, so I wasn't really thinking about faith and stuff. But yeah, psychology. Thaddeus or Milos. I'm gonna ask Milos first. Do you think, or what's your opinion on psychology and orthodoxy? Is it like, can it complement each other? Is it mutually exclusive? What's the deal?
Absolutely, it can complement each other. If you look at some, especially if you look at some of the writings of the church fathers, you can see many aspects of psychology in it when they talk about how to approach people, what to do for them, how to benefit yourself and in your environment. Because psychology is it's such a deep factor. So depending on one kind of psychology, we have the neuropsychology, then the one that always me interested the most, the clinical psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, for example, if somebody deals with depression. So the perfect solution, in my opinion, would be combining that psychology with the prayers, with the help of a priest, and having also somebody you can talk to about those problems as well, who can give you, if necessary. I'm not a big fan of medication, but if necessary, they can give you the right medication. It depends on what kind of level you need help with.
Hmm. I see. Do you have anything to add, Thaddeus?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's great.
Y-
Uh,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, medication, I'm not against it. I think the way our culture currently treats it is pretty horrific, though, like way
Mm.
over the top. And so, but there is a time and a place. It should be that last line of defense, really.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
agree.
exactly. If you go back like 80 years or so, how medication was treated in that field, it was only used for like harsher cases where it was like absolutely necessary. And in some countries nowadays, if let's say if the kid has
ADHD.
oh, that works. Thank you. In English, I always have the problem with pronouncing it. They already want to give like small children the medication, even though they know it can cause some risks with it, because the body is so rapidly developing in that early age. Because the also big part of that is the pharma industry, because there's so much money behind it.
Big pharma. Ooh.
Yeah. So it is unfortunately like that.
Yeah.
All of medicine. So pills nowadays have become overused, in my opinion, in some cases.
Definitely, I agree. I used to take ADHD medicine. It would make me basically like a zombie. So it did work, but it had some negative side effects.
Mhm.
But I don't
And
think that's the
also with,
biggest.
like-
I think the biggest problem is the hormone therapy they give into kids, but that's a whole different thing. Hey, Strahinja!
Ej,
Dobry wieczór. I mean,
dobra, dobra.
yeah.
Dobra, czy jadę sobie
My internet
phone
has
fell down.
is acting a bit weird.
All right, you're just watching Strahinja and the camera, right?
Let's watch him awkwardly and be all silent.
Yeah.
I had been put on medication when I was younger because I had struggled with a lot of depression when I was like 14-ish, and I had hard time focusing on things and getting things done like schoolwork. And so without really going into depth or detail or whatever, my family's doctor immediately just put me on medication, which didn't really help me. Like I've looking back, what I really needed was someone who could guide me through like delving deeper into like why I was having such a hard time focusing and seeing what I could do to combat that, rather than just jumping straight to medication. Like it just was useless. It just made me sadder, I think, and more depressed. And yeah, it was not helpful. But when I decided to start going to this Orthodox therapist, like I mentioned earlier, and plus started taking my spiritual life more seriously and started going to confession more regularly and talking about like my past and like my issues that I had, I started to become way better. Like I just found like myself like my life had a complete 180 after I decided to start doing confession on top of having my Orthodox therapist and stuff. So yeah.
Orthodox therapists. I don't think I have those in this country. So are there a lot of those?
Actually, you do.
I do?
Yes.
Who?
The bishop.
I mean,
He's not always in the country, but
I mean, yeah. But like specifically like Thaddeus? Like, is it a common thing, Thaddeus, in the US?
I know that we have some websites that are dedicated to like cataloging the Orthodox therapists who are out there. I can't say there's a huge number, but there is a small population. Like if you're here and you wanted to find one, there's definitely several that you can find through the internet these days. So
yeah.
I have a couple friends who were blessed enough to be able to have Orthodox therapists specifically. And yeah.
Besides going to confession, which is a way of therapy as well, would you advise to go only to Orthodox therapists?
It's definitely the best option. One of my friends, he tried both secular therapists, which was the worst experience, and a Protestant therapist who used a lot of what we Protestants, I don't know how common this phrase is elsewhere, but we call it Christianese, where you use a lot of Christian language that doesn't actually have much depth. Yeah. And it's only been a couple years ago when he tried an Orthodox therapist that he said it was worlds different. So I kind of see it as a hierarchy, like the first line of defense is your priest and your spiritual life. And to me, that's the biggest danger of the medications. I mean, they have their biological dangers and their harm that they can do. But the biggest concern I would have, even above that, is that you don't live the spiritual life because you're using this medication and it replaces it. And it's incredible how many psychological issues alleviate themselves entirely, or at least they aren't nearly as bad, just simply by living the Orthodox spiritual life. And so if that doesn't work, or if the priest recognizes that you need a little more help, then the next thing is a therapist. And the first job of a therapist is mainly just helping you talk it out. Like, they're a safe person, they ask good questions. And as my first priest said he wished there were more Orthodox therapists, because he had so many people coming to confession that they recognized they were sinning and they wanted to do something about it, but they really didn't understand the why. And he recognized that they just needed a lot of time with an equipped person to just talk about what they were doing, what their motive was, finding the deeper roots, addressing that. And then that actually gives you a deeper confession. Like, now you're doing this sin because of this deeper way you don't trust God. And when you go to confession, now you're not just confessing the surface thing, but you're confessing the deeper issue. And after all of this, if this doesn't help too, then maybe medication comes in. But yeah, it's a hierarchy like that: priest, and then a therapist, and then worst case scenario, some medication.
And always praying, right?
Yeah, that should be right up there at the top.
Is there any saint for psychological problems or depression that we can pray? We can ask their intercession for? Do you know about that?
I know that Saint Xenia of St. Petersburg is a saint that can help with mental illness. And there's a saint, it starts with a D, Dimthna, I think.
Could be,
Dimthna?
yes.
Something like that. Yeah. She also helps people with mental illness.
Man, Saint Xenia is a busy saint. She's for a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
I always tell people she always has your back for everything. She helped me, she helped me, my friends. Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, Milos, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I remember, because back in the day in your Discord there were I talked with a lot of people who had like minor depressions, and I collected a list of prayers that church fathers recommended with depression. I'm just searching up for that, and then I'll raise my hand. I'll be right back with you guys.
All right.
So so the viewers know about them.
Strahinja, what are your thoughts? You're new to this. You just joined.
My thoughts on what topic specifically?
Well,
Orthodox therapists, or?
Yeah, basically.
Well, I mean, I think, of course, as an Orthodox person, I would want to go to somebody who is of the same faith as me if I were to go to visit a therapist. And I mean, it's going to be rare, and every Orthodox person is going to want to try it out. But the problem is that, academic psychology and maybe some, psychologists that you will visit will be reading, fathers of modern psychology who are
like
as advanced as they were in, the research they were doing. They were people who personally strayed away very far from, what we would call the right path. I mean, and so
like Carl Jung.
Carl Jung, for example, is a good person. I mean, I learned a lot from reading Carl Jung, and I have certainly not read the complete works, but I know that Carl Jung is a person who was interested above all in the growth of the self, of the ego. He was interested in the empowerment of ego. He was not a God-fearing man. He was a man who explored, the occult to enrich the self and study the self. And as an Orthodox person, I believe that to be wrong. And so if you meet a psychologist today, they will not be into Carl Jung style magic. Like, that's not how things work. But they will also not necessarily be interested in Orthodoxy, or at all interested in Christianity, or at all seeing the world in the same way that the Orthodox viewer sees the world. So don't if you've never like been to a psychologist, they are not gonna start like spinning coins and rocks or some weird magic. But they might not see the world as Christians see the world, and so they might think that a fix to your problems is more maybe some behavior that you deem sinful, or some behavior that will not satisfy and that will not heal your soul. So obviously, you want to be fixed in this world so that you be fixed. What does that really mean? But you want to be able to perform your duties in this world. You want to be a good son, you want to be a good father, a good husband. But you also want, to strive for theosis. You want to, come closer to the church. You want to repent for your sins. And maybe that secular psychologist will guide you too much towards fixing your earthly problems, but not guide you enough towards fixing your spiritual problems. So if you do go to maybe like a secular psychologist, make sure that you go to a person who is open to conversation, who is talking to you, not like thinking of you as a stupid person and like refusing to explain things to you, especially if you're going to a psychoanalyst. Make sure that you're not going to an arrogant person, and always do that in conjunction to speaking to your spiritual father. I think that would be like the best thing, my best advice. It's just like visit somebody who you can connect with at least a little bit. And of course, if they are Orthodox, then it will be much better. It's like a guarantee, I think.
Interesting. And what if there's no Orthodox therapist around you? What do you do?
There are multiple things you could do, but first, for the viewers know, the list will be in the description. So I have a list of psalms that were recommended by Saint Arsenios of Cappadocia. And the list you will find in the description, guys. The list will contain Psalm 4, Psalm 27, Psalm 55, and many others. He recommended them especially to treat depression if somebody has that. So if you don't have a therapist near you or someone you're willing to go to, or you tried some of them and you don't feel comfortable with, look if you have an Orthodox monastery near you. Tell the monks your problems. It's often helps already when you talk about your problems and just let it out.
Yes.
Because if you keep everything inside, it's like a dam of water. It's just gonna fill you up, and eat you from the inside. So it's better to talk with people about that. It's always good to talk with people about that. And I recommend a monastery because of, if you can stay there a week or at least for a weekend, you will get there some peace. You will get out of your normal life where you have all the problems, and you can be somewhere else for once, where you have silence, peace, and you have retreat in prayer and retreat to Christ. And also you can get the blessings from them and communion. And I'm sure one of those priests, they will continue to pray for you after you leave the monastery.
That's great advice.
Yeah,
Couldn't
I
have-
grew up next to I grew up next to a monastery, and yeah, anytime I'd feel sad or something going wrong in my life, I could just go over there and go to the bookstore, and there'd always be a nun manning the counter, and they would invite me over to the other side, and we'd just sit and talk about anything like church history to like personal life. And they really, really helped me just through their example. And just the monastery, it feels like the most alive part of like where I live, right? Most of the area I live in is like very deserty and dry and not, but the monastery is just so full of life. Like you can feel it in your soul, and like you can physically see it, like just the gardens they maintain and the livestock and all that. But yeah, I would always leave the monastery just feeling spiritually refreshed and just more at peace, especially like mentally. Yeah, it was very good for me.
I
The
think
goal
that's
in a way is to have God be your therapist. Like when scripture talks about like pray without ceasing, or it talks about cast all your cares upon him, really what you're trying to do is everything that happens to you, good, bad, relationships, job, whatever it is, you want God, just like the same way that like when people want to date and be married, be engaged and be married, they want someone who, when they're going through life, they have a partner and a helper, someone to share these things, someone, another person to talk to about things that are going on. And marriage is a reflection of the Trinity and also of our relationship with Christ. Like marriage even existing and friendships existing is a reflection of the Trinitarian God himself. When we're made in his image, that's one of the main things that flows out of that. And so there's a reflection there that when scripture tells us over and over that we're the bride, he's the bridegroom, we're the bride. Like, and there's a way that everyone wants to talk with their spouse and friends, but there's especially like, it's kind of it's true. And it's also something we joke about is that like women especially want to share a lot of their emotions and feelings with their husband and their friends. And, so I'm a guy who does too, but we want to be like that with Christ. Like we want to, whatever happens, the first person we think I want to go talk to is Christ himself. And then after him, the saints, and of course our priests and our friends. And it's good for us that we take what's inside of us, like Milos was saying, like, and it doesn't build up. We need to get it out. It's part of our design, but God first, like God is the first one, that every little thing that happens, you see a homeless person on the street and you're worried about them, you talk to God about it. You start feeling sad or depressed, whether it's medical or psychological or some mix, whatever. First thing you do is you talk to God about it. And so, and a good thing happens. You talk to God about it. You say, thank you, Lord, for this. And so that's what we're trying to build the habit through our whole Orthodox spiritual life. And that, I'll just say my experience as an Orthodox therapist is that you'll be surprised how many psychological struggles you've had as you build this practice and habit get a lot easier. And there'll still be some struggles left. There'll still be some crosses left. But so many of our problems flow out of living an atheist life. Even if we go to church, the way we actually think throughout our day is like, oh no, a bad thing happened. What will I do? And the more we talk to God and we're his friend and we know his saints and we go to his services and we read his word, the scriptures, the more we have firsthand experience that he's there for us, that he loves us, that he is always providing for us. And if we experience that, there's less reason to fear when a negative thing happens. So all of that to say, this life of praying and treating him as our bridegroom and sharing everything with him is the first antidote to a lot of psychological problems and anxieties that we have.
Especially nihilism.
Yeah.
Because that's like a disease nowadays, especially since it gets promoted even on the internet. And people are getting more stuck in that cycle of nihilism nowadays. I used to be in it, not gonna lie.
By the way, I have to say that monologue, I think I can say monologue, was awesome. It was awesome.
Yes, it was very
don't
good.
think
And I agree.
We could have said it any
true.
better. And I wanted to thank you. The way you pronounce my name, woo! My heart felt warm. That was perfect
Glad I heard it
pronunciation.
first,
It took me a
so.
bit back. I almost got red. My face almost got.
Oh, Milo. Don't throw your riz. Anyway.
Yeah, no. What you were saying, Thaddeus, I can say it's 100% true. When I was more alone and just like turned to myself about my own issues when I was younger, right? It made me more depressed, like turning into myself, because like I would turn to like the internet to like explain why I was feeling the way I was, right? Which is dangerous. And like as a 14-year-old kid who's confused and going through puberty, all these things, I was very lost at that time. And I just found all these things that say, oh, you're depressed, you have this, you have that, you have this, that, and all these things. And like even the internet romanticized that. And it made me feel like worse and worse. And when I finally confessed to my dad, like I was just in a complete wrecked state mentally, he was able to hook me up with that Orthodox therapist, and she told me like, yeah, you developed what's it called, CPTSD. And because I had like I had some bad things happen in my childhood, which I won't go into, but it was bad. And so it's CPTSD. I think it's more like you get emotional flashbacks, right? So, and I would like get those flashbacks, but then feel like, oh, I'm justified in feeling angry at the person who hurt me, or angry and sad, and I just remember getting like worse with like panic attacks and all these things and anger issues and things. But then my therapist was like, no, you need to start going to confession. You need to start confessing these, because this is not good for your soul, right? Like justifying that anger, right? It doesn't matter what the person who, hurt me did. Like, I have to move on from that, right? Or like, well, yeah, it did matter, right? What she did to me is not, you can't justify it. But I, like, with confession and like therapy, like really reflecting on myself and like changing myself, learning to forgive, learning to let go of this pain. And when I just couldn't handle it, turning to, Christ, and like asking him to just take it and handle it and help me. Like, that helped me so much. And I just started to realize that the person who hurt me, she had problems too. She was very lost too. She's a very lost, confused person, but she's starting to get way better now. But yeah, it's just turning to therapy, especially to confession. It turned my life around 100%. Like confession, especially, because like it really lifts those sins, like the things that just fester in your soul, like all that anger and hurt and all that. It just takes it away,
Yeah.
And Christ takes care of it. And especially when I went to confession last night, I feel so much lighter in my soul every time. Like one time I confessed some this anger I had towards that person one time, and I felt like an arm reached into my soul after confession and pulled it out, and I just felt lifted up and clean. And
So another thing to add with the things Mary said, for example, big factor with those kind of problems is regret. People keeping still those things in their heart, the wrongdoings that they had in their life, even years after they had it, and they still get emotional stress over it, whether it's anxiety, anger, or other things. And the only things that can truly let go of it, how Mary explained it, is like prayers, confession, and letting it go, letting it in the past and looking to our future. Because we have to also to remind ourselves, God wants us to be happy and to do his work. And also the possibilities, what's gonna happen to us in the future, are endless. We don't know how good our life can be, so we should strive to make it the best as possible.
All right. And I'm wondering about another thing. I think we spoke briefly about this topic in the demonology episode with Bible Illustrated, but mental illnesses. When is it demonic? When isn't it? That's a very interesting topic for me. For example, gender dysphoria, schizophrenia. Thaddeus, could you maybe answer that?
Yeah. I come from the background of Protestants who are always blaming anything mental illnessy on demons, but they don't really understand the mechanisms of demons, so it's not very meaningful to see the demonic influence like they do. But for us Orthodox, we know a lot more about demons and how they work. And I mean, yeah, mental illness is so broad, especially when you're coming from the secular world. I mean, we definitely have, first of all, what the demons are preying on most of the time is they're preying, starting from the very spiritual core. So yeah, let's start really, really basic here and work up, because I think it gives us a really full answer. Our heart is designed to bear Christ. And when it has Christ in it, everything else in our heart flows how it should. He guides the thing, he puts things in our heart's desires that he wants to be there, and he designs them to grow and to flourish. And so we desire a job or a spouse or friendship, and he guides these things and they become pure. But the problem is that we're without him. And so these things kind of grow like a twisted root without guidance. Like a tree, like a plant growing without like a stick. He's the stick, he's the logos, the line, the measure of what is straight. And so it kind of grows and bends and twists. And so at our core, we have these desires that God has put there, but then they twist and we try and fulfill them our own way. And that causes a lot of anxiety because we're the one who has to be our own God and protect ourselves. And the demons prod at this. So it's important to understand on one hand that when they prod at something, it's usually something that at its core God has put on our hearts. Like if God gives us the desire to be married, what they do is they go, you'll always be alone, you'll never find anyone, and these sorts of fears, you're too ugly, blah blah blah, whatever it is, they prod at it. And so we sometimes go the opposite extreme to despair because we think we shouldn't even want it at all. There's all different ways they trick us into responding. They're very clever. But when it comes to mental illness, what I've observed, and I think the fathers and our holy elders today say similar, is that people have a predisposition towards something, and then the demons exacerbate it and prod at it, so it turns into a disorder. So you might have someone who is designed to have a more, I'll be really broad, like a fun personality that can let things go easily and move topics. And as the demons distract such a person and bring temptations, that person develops like ADHD, ADD, whatnot, where it's kind of like it, rather than being a strength, it becomes this dominating and oppressive force that causes more problems. Anxiety is the same. You have these people that God makes very sensitive, and that's their strength. They're sensitive to the pains and needs of others. And then as the demons prod at them and poke at them, they develop an anxious disorder where the body kind of gets used to living in this unstable world. And so it's kind of a spectrum. You have some people who have really strong biological causes and dispositions, and you have other people who, if they would just live the spiritual life, most, if not all of what they're struggling with would be gone. So, but it's something that it's, no matter what it is, I always say if it's causing you distress in any way, there's demons involved, because God doesn't cause that. God doesn't want you to be dejected. He doesn't want you to be stressed. Saint Theophil, the fool for Christ, said, echoing the early church fathers, he said, all thoughts that are from God are peaceful and gentle and lead a man towards humility and judging himself. And that sets up really good boundaries, because on one hand, anything from God is peaceful and gentle. It doesn't make you go into panic and these highly stressful states. That's what Satan and the demons want. But it also doesn't lead us to think, oh, I'm so awesome, or I love myself, and focus on my desires. Like right smack dab in the middle is peaceful, but radically self-honest about our flaws. And so any way outside of that will lead to mental illness, either like an extreme narcissism or an extreme dejection. But yeah, there's a lot more to mental illness than that, but I think that's a very good foundation, is seeing that there's biological mechanisms going on, and then there's also the demons pushing us and influencing us and exacerbating things, making them worse.
Okay. That's a very interesting explanation. Very interesting. Hello, Carl Jung.
How are you? That was my namesake, actually. Carl Jung was because Milos was having a go at me in a group chat sometime. He started calling me Carl Jung and changed my profile
that's
name.
not how exactly the story went. I was talking about psychology with some others, and one guy said, I like the readings of Carl Jung's. I think I'm gonna buy a collection of all of his books. I said, yeah, he has some nice readings. I like him more than Freud. Freud was too weird with me with his over-sexualization of everything. But Jung is also has some weird stuff, and then Carl went to troll us. Why don't you marry Carl Jung if you if you love him that much? So I didn't say that. That's a joke. I renamed him Carl Jung.
So that's his name now, Carl.
Yeah.
It's
You look
stuck
very
for
tired, Carl.
a long
I'm not
time.
sure if I
just
should go
woke
to
up,
Australia and
so-
give you a coffee or tuck you back into bed.
No, I just woke up. Sorry, it's early morning in Australia, so
Then good morning
yeah.
to you.
So-
what I did want to ask Thaddeus on that topic before we change is, do you then think mental illness can change? Can someone have a mental illness and then lose it, or not have one and then acquire it?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, we're describing just such a myriad of different things going on. It's kind of like, trying to think of a random example, like being like, can the economy in this nation be saved? And it's like economics is so complex. Like there's just so many different variables that it depends on the mental illness. It depends on I think it's important too. I was going to add this, and it answers the question. And I heard this first from an abbess of a monastery in Southern California. Her name's Mother Melania, but she said, part of mental illness is a cross. Like there are things that are off in your mind biologically, whatever, from genetics passed down from your family. And those are things that God doesn't see as something to be cured. And he doesn't see it as sinful, and he doesn't see it as, something from the demons. He sees it as a cross to bear, just as much as a physical illness can be. And I think this is something I stress a lot with my clients. I think whether it can change or not, the spiritual life is the main test you do to see if it can be healed or cured or whatever it is. Because and this is what's happening a lot with kind of like the modern, like secular psychology movements, is they're so interested in being defensive about neurodiversity and mental illness, which are very real things, but they've like made such an idol of them. And they don't have good solutions, because without Christ, you don't have a complete solution to anything. But they've made such an idol out of defending it, and they get defensive really easy. And this is ultimately because a person gets defensive because they don't have a foundation. Like when you're confident in yourself, the more confident you are, the less defensive you get. And the natural fruit of being in relationship with the Lord is less defensiveness, like the saints had, because they know truly Christ is their judge. There's no reason to like be defensive because of what this person says. But we see the world right now with LGBT movements and everything like being really defensive. And for us Orthodoxes, we live this spiritual life, and we, like I was talking about earlier, we pray as if God is sovereign, as if he loves us, as if he cares about everything that happens to us, as if nothing happens without a purpose that he has for us. As we pray like this, we acquire peace, and a lot of the mental struggles reside. But after we've done this and we have this peace, and we know that we see God at work, whatever remains, we know is more likely some valid cross. And this is something that takes time, and it takes input of a spiritual father. Of course, it's not linear or like something you're done with, but it's something as, when you first start out, you don't really know what is, mental, what is spiritual, where the lines are. But as you live the Orthodox spiritual life, and a lot of it resides, whatever is left, you have this peace about it, and you don't have to defend it to anyone. You don't have to prove it. You don't have pity parties for yourself. You don't do any of that. You just like, yeah, I know, sometimes I have this struggle. I can't focus at, these times a day or whatever it is. And you just have this peace about it. And Lord, you've allowed this. This is difficult, but you've allowed this for a purpose. And I think whatever the answer to, full circle here, the question is, can the stuff change? I think that's what's most important, is that we live that spiritual life, and then whatever is left, we see it as a cross. And maybe, 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, we'll find some cure to it. We'll find, whether it's on the off chance medication, or in for me, a lot of food allergies I found out I had that were causing some of my depression. Like whatever it is, we might find that down the road. But I think I think the spiritual life is the ultimate test of each individual thing, what can and can't change, and how it should change if it should.
Well, I think mental disorders or illnesses can also be a blessing in disguise sometimes. For example, autism, I have that. I can basically get hyperfixated on one thing and get really good at it. For example, making videos. It can be a blessing in disguise, but of course it's also a cross. But Milos, what did you want to say?
I wanted to ask, when are you getting good at videos? No, I'm joking.
Hey, man. I'm logging off. I'm leaving. Goodbye. I'm stopping the recording.
No, but Thaddeus made
Best
some
line on
awesome
the
points,
podcast so far.
and it reminded me of a story of Saint Paisios with I think his name was Marcos, the guy in the village in Greece in the wheelchair. So in the beginning of his life, he was normal, healthy, and then his health deteriorated, and he couldn't move down from his neck anymore. And he always went to liturgy, to as many services as possibly could, and always prayed to God to be healthy again. And the rest of the village always took care of him and treated him as a family member. So one day, a rich Greek guy that was, I think, in the late 70s or early 80s, he came to that village and heard about him, and he said, "Hey, I heard about a new operation in the US. I can get you to the US and pay for that operation for you." And he was like extremely happy when he heard that. He was like, "Finally, my prayers have been answered. But before we do that, I want to get a blessing from Father Paisios, from Saint Paisios." And so they met the next day on the marketplace at 6 a.m. with Saint Paisios. And he just went down on his knees, started massaging his feet, and said, "How many people will these little feet lead to heaven?" Then he handed out his hand like this. He grabbed his hand, and all of a sudden he felt blood rushing to his body again. And they walked around the fountain on the city center, on the village center, on that marketplace, and back to the wheelchair again. He put him down on the wheelchair again, and he saw how his blood went cold again completely, and he couldn't move anymore. Wow. And he got like sad, and he asked him, "What happened? How was I able to walk like a second ago with you, and now I can't?" And he just looked him in the eyes and said, "Don't go to the US for the operation. Stay here and pray. It's not worth it. They will experiment on you. It's new. And what is this life of 50, 60 years on earth compared to the eternal kingdom of God?" And then 20 years later, I think Marcos was the name, the guy in the wheelchair, he reposed, and everybody took care of him in the village. And we know what St. Paisios meant by that. He meant he and the people in the village, they fitted to each other that well. And it was a good deed. So he didn't need to worry about anything earthly anymore.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I think a lot of everything from anxiety and to like nihilism comes from the fact that like we live in this life that has a specific purpose. And everything that happens to us, as our saints say over and over, every single thing that happens to us has a purpose in God's order for why he allows it. Even if whether he causes it or we cause it and he allows it, or someone else does it to us, it always has a purpose. And if we don't understand what this life is for, then it just feels nebulous and meaningless. There was a samurai who said, "I can suffer anything if it has meaning," and that's what we need. But if we don't have meaning, if we don't have purpose, we feel totally helpless and we feel anxious. And so the Orthodox life, being in the church, tells us what the purpose of life is, and that's repentance. And repentance is more, I come from, again, the Protestant background. It's more than like, God, don't punish me because I did bad things. Like that's part of it. Like you're asking for his mercy in that sense. But really repentance is metanoia, which is change of nous. And the nous is, among other things, it's our attention. Like that's kind of like our nous pointed at something. And so we want our nous to always be on Christ. And so change of nous, metanoia, repentance is really all these things. You're sinning because all these things in the world that you put your nous on, the center of your heart and your being, you've allowed something in creation to take it captive, a person or alcohol or whatever it is. And so repentance is put your heart back on Christ, put it back on Christ. And so we're in this life every day. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Put your heart back on Christ. Share with him what's going on in your life. Schedule your day, just like a bride would schedule around the groom's day when she's making dinner, when she's making breakfast. Schedule your day, your prayer rule, the services. Schedule your life around these things so that your heart goes back on Christ. And then all these miserable things that happen to you, mental illness, losing your job, whatever, you see how they help in all of this. Like they all contribute to it. So if you don't have this, if you don't know that this is what life is about, life is just like nebulously awful. It's just dark and it's horrifying. And you're trying to find a political movement to make you feel better, or a gender surgery and hormone treatment, or whatever it is, you're looking somewhere else. But once you know what it's about, these illnesses that you struggle with, including mental ones, they actually start to bring joy, because you see not joy in the pain itself, but how it's a gateway to Christ, how it pushes all these things aside. And that's what Elder Thaddeus, my patron, taught me very early in my Orthodox journey. He said he had all these friends that thought, a career or fame or marriage or something was going to make them happy. And he saw that, it lasted a little while, kind of a delusion, which wasn't an insult to them. It was so easy to think this, but he was ill as a child. Doctors said he was going to die. He lost his mom when he was young. He was very depressed. Other kids didn't play with him. And he said it was the greatest gift because it helped him see that all this other stuff was empty and that only two things mattered: love God and love other people. And he said, you center your life around that and you have meaning. Think about think about God and think about other people and revolve your life around them. And he said, anything else comes first and you will be miserable. You will be unhappy. And I think nihilism is people's attempt to just kind of like normalize this meaninglessness. That's really what it is. There's no meaning, make your own, which doesn't really make sense. But yeah, it's like the ultimate fruit of unresolved mental illness across society that's actually spiritual illness.
And it's a lot of stocked up anger, I assume.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the people who are nihilistic, I would say probably 90% are young men who are very angry. But it doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah.
There is an easy solution. Well, nothing in life is actually easy.
Yeah.
But there is to everything solution.
Do you know who wrote a great book on nihilism?
Father Seraphim Rose.
There you go. If you haven't read that, what a great man. What a great man that was. Go read that book. It's available. Anyway. Carl, do you have anything else to ask?
No, I think that went through it in detail. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Yes. I just want to give to add something else. Basically for the viewers, like we talked about now about multiple mental health issues. And it's a very deep and complex topic, because some people could have the same problems depression-wise, but for the one person it would be a minor depression, and for the other person it would be an extremely high depression. Because everyone is so different, and you have to look at every case at a very individualistic view. Thank you.
Yeah,
Ooh, that threw me completely off.
I'm your
Please
logoped.
take away so I can hide in shame after butchering that word.
Individualized, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's very interesting because when you try and measure, we're using this word like depression. And I know just from my own personal experience that I've had multiple different experiences that if I took like a test for depression, a depression inventory, where it's like you check the little boxes and they rate your depression, I would rate like a similar score for these experiences. And yet the inner experience itself is totally different. And when I like tried to figure out what's going on, it was different causes. Like at first I was struggling with like life feels meaningless. I hate being alive. And if I took a depression inventory, it would have said, yeah, you have depression. And it's, negative thoughts over time as I was reading Elder Thaddeus. And I'm like, oh, like I need to, rather than, like just wallow and wonder why this is happening, I need to thank God because these heal me and these make me closer to him and able to actually love other people with his help. And so I started thanking God and I noticed, this alleviated and I was glad to be alive. I was genuinely thankful. Like I always saw it as a sin, but I didn't know how to stop. I was like, Lord, I know I should like being alive. I know I should be thankful. I just genuinely am not. And that alleviated over time. But I was still having in the evenings when my mood just would drop really hard and I would feel awful. And I'm like, God, I'm not upset about anything anymore. I used to be. It used to be at this time of day, I'd be really, all these negative things would flood in. I have no negative things, but I just feel bad. And then over time, I went to some specialists and I found out I had gut issues, allergies, mainly to soy and dairy. And that alleviated probably 75% of that experience. But each of these experiences, totally different, they would call depression. Like, oh, you have depression just because we use the same words. I feel gray, I feel negative, like I don't feel good. But the truth is we're probably describing a bunch of different disorders. We just don't have the level of language to distinguish. So that alone is just like a major factor that like if you're wrestling with depression, we kind of don't always know that we're even talking about the same thing. And that's part of why like Milos was saying, like we have a bunch of different things that have to be looked at. And I think a lot of people are dealing with, kind of like I was, like several different things at once. Like it can be negative thoughts, it can be dietary issues, it can be genetics. I think a lot of people out there not only do they have these really tough struggles, but it's comorbidity, as we call it in psychology. So yeah.
Man, thank you for putting my
definitely.
thoughts into words that I couldn't express. I was like, where are the English words? I need to find them.
But I find that the modern psychological method is actually very similar to how you have a confession with a priest, actually. So my growing up, I had a psychologist, and he was actually an Orthodox priest when he wasn't in the office. So that was a very, very helpful for me, because whenever he'd recommend something, there'd be some spiritual component that I feel like if he didn't add that in, I'd be missing the full solution to whatever the issue was. And long story short, this helped me so much with lots of things growing up. It was a very long term. What I was seeing this guy, my studies, it got to the point where I was not seeing him because, I was anxious about this or that. I was just seeing, my mum would book in the appointments and I'd see him and he'd give me advice on pretty much everything in a very similar way to how you have confession. And I remember seeing somewhere, maybe you can correct me on this, but is the modern psychological method based on the confessional when they have the talk and they sit you on the chair and they say, can you lay down and tell me all your problems? Are they related in any way?
Yes. By concepts, they are. Because before we had psychologists, we already had confession. So that was just basically they took that from the priests and used it in that way.
Okay.
Because even if you go back to the early days, one way of doing confession of the early Christians, they did it in a room where everybody was together, and then they confessed their sins to each other.
All right. Thank you very much. What, Carl?
You know, I'm saying that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I just thought it crossed my mind, and they seemed so similar, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah,
That's
a lot of cults have people practice confession because it's just a human need. Like you need, we know from the Orthodox perspective, man is a priest, and this means a lot of different things. But one of the things it means is that he's meant to unify the spiritual and the physical. And so we're meant to bear God in us as a temple, and then we go out like Adam and Eve to creation and love it, and it's infused with this spiritual state. And this is what relics are. This is what holy objects are and holy ground. And even as a therapist, we're not just doing this with bearing God in us, but we're doing this with everything that's going on in us. This is what art is. Art is, I want to take what's inside me and express it into the world somehow. And so every emotion we have, we want to do that. And we want to express it to other people, especially, which is, also it reflects priesthood, and it also reflects the Trinity, because it gets it out of us and it bonds us with another person. And so one of the major experiences we're having emotionally is shame. And shame is this experience that we're not what we should be. That we know in our conscience what a human is, and we take a different path, and we can feel this distance, and that's shame, is like, I'm not what I should be. And the only reason God allows shame is to push us to him. Like, it really doesn't have another purpose. We're supposed to go, oh, there's something wrong here, and I need the help of God, and I need the help of other people, and that's what it's for. But after this, we have confession, because that's all it was for. Once we go to Christ, especially in confession, he forgives us, and what needed to be accomplished was accomplished. And so the psychological world is trying to address shame, because it's one of these emotional realities we need to process. And like I said, even cults prey upon this, because they know humans really, really need to find a way to deal with this disconnect. But yeah, so it's, anyways, all that to say, it's all connected. It's very deeply connected.
Exactly. And there is also another point we can see how it is connected. Like we already established the point, priest existed already before the therapist. And how do we call the priest? Father, because he's our spiritual father.
Exactly.
And when we go to the therapist, he wants us to feel like he cares for us, like a family member, like somebody that wants to help us. So he's trying to, what's that word?
Replace,
Emulate, something like that.
Imitate?
Basically,
yeah, emulate, imitate.
Emulating the same feeling that we had with a spiritual father in his flock, or a member of our family that we trusted and felt safety with. So that everything goes in hand, because from our birth on, we have our parents who take care of us. So we are always looking up to somebody naturally, where we can feel safe to. That's also because God made us. So as we call God the Father and Lord, so that everything plays with each other, if you guys know what I mean. Man, I explained it horrible.
No,
I don't know
it's
why my
alright.
accent gets worse and worse.
It's all right. It's late. It's
It
Sunday
happens,
evening.
bro.
I guess
my day just started.
I sound like more and more.
I
like
guess
just came.
we gotta end it
Yeah,
soon,
no.
anyways.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
this was a
that's
very great session, guys. I learned a lot, especially
Mhm.
since I don't know anything about psychology. So I just sat here and listened to you guys, which I'm very grateful for. Especially Thaddeus, thank you so much for joining. I hope you
Thanks
enjoyed
for
it.
having me.
We might do this another time if you're up to it.
Yeah,
Um,
anytime, let me know.
Yeah. If anyone's watching and maybe wants an Orthodox therapist and maybe is in the area, which area are you in, Thaddeus?
I'm in Salt Lake City,
All right.
Utah, in the United States, and most of my clients are online. Like, we do video calls on Telegram. So
All right. Great.
yeah.
Mormon capital around there.
Yeah. Yeah, doing our best work here at the Orthodox parish I go to for the Mormons. So
All right. Anyway, if
Yeah.
you want, you can contact him on Twitter. Anyway, follow him on Twitter, YouTube, anywhere, Instagram. You can find him over there. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and God bless. Goodbye.
And if you don't hesitate to reach out to people when you have depression,
Yeah, of course.
whether it's your priest or a psychologist, get help wherever you can.
Exactly.
Amen.
All right. God bless.